Trump had a disastrous day at the Supreme Court where his pet peeve, the idea of universal injunctions, the idea that one judge could stop his policy nationwide. This is evidently the bane of his existence, the worst judicial overreach possible. And it was done in connection with his birthright citizenship, perhaps one of his most unconstitutional executive orders. This should have been his day, his moment to convince the Supreme Court, which has a majority appointed by him or other Republican presidents. But instead, his Trump lawyer fell flat again and again and again. And who knew this? Trump himself, as evidenced by his ranting, his intimidation of the Supreme Court on his Truth Social posts. Trump knew he lost too. Let's get into it. This is Dina Dahl with the MeidasTouch Network. Now, there was some reporting by mainstream media that there was unclear how the justices were going to go, despite the fact that there's clips and clips out there circulating about how badly his lawyers did. Perhaps you saw the live stream we did on Legal AF and the post-analysis I did with Popak. Trump clearly lost. For whatever reason, some reporting out there didn't want to admit it as usual. They end up trying to give Trump a pass again and again. But Trump, he knew he lost. And he went to his usual toolbox, intimidation and threats, because he knew the law wasn't going to help him. His lawyer certainly didn't help him. This is what he posted on Truth Social. He said, quote, "The radical left sleazebags, which has no cards remaining in its illegal bags of tricks, is in a very coordinated manner playing the ref with regard to the United States Supreme Court." Of course, everything he says is a projection. The idea that there are no cards remaining is because his remaining card was arguing in front of the Supreme Court, and he obviously is going to lose that argument. He goes on to say, "They lost the election in a landslide, and with it have totally lost their confidence and reason." It's interesting. He brings in loss of confidence. I'm wondering if he's losing some confidence with those approval ratings that are so low and continuing to plummet. Goes on, quote, "They are stone cold crazy." Again, projection, much. He goes on to say, "I hope the Supreme Court doesn't fall for the games they play. The people are with us in bigger numbers than ever before. They want to make America great again." I mean, as we've seen, the people have actually been protesting in the streets as never before. The people, as in the polling, is upset with Trump as never before. Perhaps he's talking about all the January 6th defendants he just pardoned. The conversation he had with Enrique Tarrio. It's interesting when he talks about this. What exactly is he intimidating the Supreme Court with? But that wasn't enough. He's still so upset about this imminent loss. The fact that they didn't see the law his way, aren't going to, put these judges in their place. He goes on to say in his next Truth Social post the next day, "The Supreme Court is being played by the radical left losers who have no support. The public hates them, and their only hope is the intimidation of the court itself. We can't let that happen to our country." So basically everything he said there is really what he is doing. The public hates him, as seen by this plummeting approval numbers. And the only hope he has left is intimidating the court, which is exactly what he is doing. I haven't seen Democrats do anything other than have their representatives in court arguing in a very legal, perhaps even dry legal way, not political at all. In fact, the lawyers who were arguing against Trump kind of conceded some issues. They were very reasonable. So it's all, as Trump always is projection. He can't handle the fact that the Supreme Court isn't going to give him what he wants, and he's deciding to intimidate them. And it's not just an empty threat when you are the president of the United States and the executive branch is controlling the budget and the court marshals, which are directed by the Department of Justice. And the court marshals are the ones that protect the Supreme Court justices. They have already gone out and talked about the increased threats to Supreme Court justices and judges nationwide because of the fact that he and J.D. Vance and others are talking about them being the evil of society. So here's the Supreme Court just having a case in front of them. It is such a national importance that they decide to take it up. And they have the president out there trying to intimidate them, trying to talk about public coming after them, trying to talk about people intimidating them, all the while they know that their protection is basically at the disposal of a department that Trump controls. This is how authoritarian regimes and dictators get what they want. So yes, he knows he lost. And let's get into a little bit why it was so obvious that he lost. So what's at stake here? Let me just also read, if you remember, this nationwide injunctions, according to J.D. Vance, that post he put a while ago. If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general on how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. Well, that was the question in front of the Supreme Court, because the question was whether or not the nationwide injunction, which put a pause on Trump's executive order changing birthright citizenship in the Constitution, was constitutional. Ironically, it's not just one judge in this case that did a nationwide injunction, even though that's all they've been complaining about. Here, there were actually 3 different judges that issued a nationwide injunction. Those cases were consolidated and brought to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court actually has a majority of judges who don't really like nationwide injunctions. Even the liberal Justice Kagan has come out because it can be abused and has been abused on both sides. Republicans always went to the Amarillo court in Texas, where the one judge, Kaczynski, always ruled in favor of Trump. So there is a game that's played. And so there is an argument for maybe reining this in to some extent. So Trump's lawyer fumbled it that badly that this is why it was so disastrous, because he went in front of the court and tried to say that instead of nationwide injunctions, there should be something called class actions, in particular Rule 23B class actions, which means that somebody should file and say that Trump's executive order violates the constitutional rights of a class of children born to undocumented children. And that is how they should try to stop the executive order instead of an injunction. People cannot opt out of the class action, but they do have to be certified as a class. And that is what the judges got into. And Justice Kagan was trying to say, okay, if this is your alternative, let's get into it. How valid is this? And Trump's lawyer really didn't even want to concede that they would be willing to have that group of people be certified as a class. So here he is offering an alternative to nationwide injunctions, but then not even conceding that that was a feasible alternative. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was appointed by Trump, jumped in kind of incredulously saying, like, are you really saying what you're saying? Take a listen.
You're going to be standing up here in the next case saying that Rule 23 is inapt for this circumstance with this number of people, maybe with some questions that are individual, who knows? So let's put Rule 23 aside, because I got to tell you, that does not fill me with great confidence. How else are we going to get to the right result here, which is on my assumption that the EO is illegal?
That would be a profoundly wrong result. But I think what I would offer is that, very similar to Labrador against Poe, what the court should be engaging here is a balancing of the equitable factors as to the scope of remedial relief, not as to the underlying merits. And our contention that this exceeds the traditional scope of equity that's reflected in the 1789 Judiciary Act, we're overwhelmingly likely to succeed on those merits for all the reasons that I've stated in our briefs.
I mean, that's a lot of words, and I don't have an answer for if one thinks, and you know, look, there are all kinds of abuses of nationwide injunctions. But I think that the question that this case presents is that if one thinks that it's quite clear that the EO is illegal, how does one get to that result? In what time frame? on your set of rules without the possibility of a nationwide injunction?
On this case and on many similar cases, the appropriate way to do it is for there to be multiple lower courts considering it, the appropriate percolation that flows through the lower courts, and then ultimately this court decides the merits in a nationwide binding precedent. You have a complete inversion of that through the nationwide injunctions with the district.
So, General
courts.
Sauer, are you really going to answer Justice Kagan by saying there's no way to do this expeditiously?
Well, I'll refer to my former answers.
Again and again, Trump's lawyer just couldn't even be reasonable. He couldn't agree that they would be willing to certify the class. He wasn't willing to agree that they would follow judgments of the circuit, meaning that the only thing left is a nationwide injunction. And this is what the justices called him out on again and again. Even Kavanaugh called him out because Trump's lawyer started out with the fact that there's been so many injunctions lately in modern history, and this is a problem. And Kavanaugh, who I don't really ever agree with, said, well, isn't there a lot of injunctions because of the fact that Congress hasn't been able to get anything done? And so presidents have basically exceeded their power with executive orders, which is why you're having more nationwide injunctions, which seems to be the exact opposite of that tweet that J.D. Vance put out that somehow judges cannot stop the power of the president. So this is how you fail miserably at the court if you are Trump. And I'm going to leave it on Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson because her quote was perhaps the best description of what Trump is trying to do. They're not really just trying to stop the idea of one judge having so much power. They're trying to stop anybody from stopping them at any time. Because even class actions, the first lawyer that files a class action goes forward. So what is to stop a Trump-friendly lawyer from filing a class action to protect the rest of our constitutional rights? It would be a disaster. This is so unworkable. This is why Trump's lawyer failed so miserably. But Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson points out so beautiful that the chaotic nature of this proposal he was offering as an alternative to a nationwide injunctions was just that chaotic. And it turns our justice system into a catch me if you can regime, which sounds to me exactly like the kind of regime Trump is trying to create. And she just called him out on it. Take a listen.
Let me just turn your attention to one other thing, because the real concern, I think, is that your argument seems to turn our justice system, in my view at least, into a catch me if you can kind of regime from the standpoint of the executive, where everybody has to have a lawyer and file a lawsuit in order for the government to stop violating people's rights. Justice Kagan says, let's assume for the purpose of this that you're wrong about the merits, that the government is not allowed to do this under the Constitution. And yet it seems to me that your argument says we get to keep on doing it until everyone who is potentially harmed by it figures out how to file a lawsuit, hire a lawyer, etc. And I don't understand how that is remotely consistent with the rule of law.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.